Hey, what's up guys? Jordan Schumacher here, and in this video, and really in the next couple videos, we're going to be talking about profitable funnel models and how to actually incorporate those profitable different types and classes of funnels into your paid traffic campaigns so that ultimately the ads that you run are able to be as profitable as possible. And so the first type of funnel that we're going to talk about is one of the most common funnels that you're going to see, especially if you're seeing Facebook ads and seeing advertisements for any sort of service, SaaS product, or educational product. One of the most profitable and effective funnels on Facebook today is the webinar funnel. So let's take a look at what that funnel looks like. So the webinar funnel right now, as of this recording, is currently the most effective way to take cold traffic, someone who's never heard of you, your brand, your product, build rapport and authority with them, and then convert them into a high-ticket offer, a relatively high-ticket offer in a short period of time, typically almost certainly within a week, typically in as little as 24 to 48 hours. And so webinars are really most effective at selling digital online education products or service offers, or SaaS products, really any product that requires some sort of education to the prospect. So any product that requires educating the prospect around their problems and establishing your authority as the best solution to those problems. Webinars are most effective at making those kinds of sales. And so the typical products that sort of align with webinars are, like I said, digital products, so SaaS products, any sort of software, any sort of online education product, or any sort of coaching, consulting, or service offer are all able to be sold incredibly effectively and profitably to cold traffic via a webinar funnel. And so like I mentioned, webinars are the most effective mechanism for selling high-ticket products in an automated manner to cold traffic. And so the webinar funnel is a very, very simple funnel at its most basic. It consists of an ad, a webinar registration landing page, the webinar itself, and then the sales page or the call to action page on the back end of that webinar. However, the downside to the webinar funnel is that it is a relatively complex funnel, and so it does require significant user engagement to actually get through the entire funnel. And as a result of that, there's a relatively high prospect drop-off rate at each stage of the funnel, and we're going to walk through what that looks like in a minute. And so in order to compensate for the relatively high drop-off rate, the leakiness of the funnel, if you will, the offer being sold must be high ticket, which is typically why you're going to see most products being sold on webinars are typically in the $1,000 to $5,000 plus price range. It's just more difficult to make a webinar funnel profitable to cold traffic if your sale price is less than $1,000. Personally, I would not recommend attempting to sell a product at less than $500 through a webinar funnel, simply because, again, you're spending so much money to get a single person all the way through that funnel that it's going to be tough to recollect that initial ad spend, to recoup your cost and your investment of attracting that customer there. And then as a general rule of thumb, for the most part, and obviously this isn't a hard and fast rule, but for most products that cost greater than $2,000 to $3,000, typically that is going to need to be sold via some sort of phone consultation or phone call, just because people, especially cold traffic, are not typically comfortable shelling out $3,000 plus without actually talking to a human. And so oftentimes a product that's greater than $2,000, greater than $3,000, the webinar funnel is going to be exactly the same, but instead of the call to action on the webinar being like, hey, just go to this order form and buy now, it's going to be, hey, get on the phone with me, let's talk, let's see if this is going to be a good fit for you. And so let's take a closer look at what the webinar funnel actually looks like, and sort of discuss some of the drop-off rates and things like that we were talking about. So a typical webinar funnel consists of an ad to a webinar registration landing page, to the webinar itself, and then it's going to go to some sort of sales page. And this sales page is either going to offer the option to book a call, and that is my phone. That is a very terrible phone, but that's my phone. Or it is going to just be a straight up, sales page like, hey, put in your credit card here and buy the thing now. And again, typically calls are for, $3K plus price points, and then you can send people straight to a sales page for anything less than that. Now, on the spectrum, if you remember a previous video that we did, there's sort of a spectrum of funnel complexity, right? And so you have along the x-axis here, you have complexity of the funnel. And along the y-axis, you have the number of people who complete the funnel. And so that line sort of looks something like this, right? The more complex your funnel, the fewer people who are actually going to enter it and then end up going all the way through consuming all the content in that funnel. And so because this webinar funnel is pretty complex, people have to register for a webinar here, and then they have to actually view the webinar. That webinar is usually, a couple hours long, and then they have to go to yet another page and actually purchase. The complexity of a webinar funnel is typically somewhere down here. And so that means that it's a relatively complex funnel, which means that fewer people are actually going to complete the funnel, which means that, if you spend money to attract 100 leads, maybe only 10 to 15 of those leads even come out the end. And so what that means is that you need to have a relatively high ticket offer to make up for the cost of those, 85 to 90 leads that you spent money on that didn't go anywhere. And it also means that you need to have a rock solid retargeting system in place throughout the rest of this funnel, which means that you need to have follow-up in place for anyone who registers for your webinar but doesn't actually consume it. So you need to have emails in place that remind people like, hey, if you haven't seen the webinar, like you remind them to go check it out. And you need to have very strong follow-up emails in place for anyone who sees the webinar to actually go to the sales page and convert on that, whether it's to book a call with you or whether it's to purchase a product. In addition to a very strong, email and sort of automated outreach follow-up sequence, you also need to have very, very strong ad retargeting, just again to move as many people as possible through that funnel so that you're recouping as much of your investment as you possibly can. And so typically you're going to have retargeting ads. You're going to have retargeting ads here to hit up anyone who views the landing page and bounces. They're going to see a different ad, potentially advertising a slightly different angle of the webinar to ultimately get them to register. Anyone who registers for the webinar, then they're going to see multiple ads. Typically, again, they're going to see multiple ads to get them to convert to the sales page. And then anyone who bounces from the sales page, again, there's typically going to be at least one ad that they're going to look at that's going to remind them to go back to the sales page and ultimately complete that conversion. And so just to recap, webinars are incredibly powerful. Right now, they're the absolute best way to sell any sort of online education product, sell any sort of service, and really sell any sort of high-ticket product to cold traffic. A webinar funnel is the best way to do that. But because of the relatively high complexity of the webinar funnel, because of the high drop-off rate and kind of the leakiness of that funnel, it's incredibly important to have a rock-solid retargeting play in place and have a rock-solid follow-up sequence in place, which we'll be covering much more in an additional video. And so this is an overview of the webinar funnel. Please let me know if you have any questions. Leave a question in the comments below, and I'll get back to you. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.